Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Robert, thank you for joining Lawyers Who Learn. I'm a bit intimidated right now because you run a company called LawPods that does editing for legal podcasts. So I'm going to do my best to impress you.
Hey, I really appreciate that. I know exactly what that feels like because you've probably been dabbling in this stuff longer than I have probably, because I was a lawyer when I got into it. I think it'd be cool to do one of these at my office. So I know what it feels like to have no idea what you're doing, and then just all the pain it takes to get there.
It's interesting, and we'll talk about that too, actually. There's two components. One, in 2006, before podcasting was a thing, I actually had a public access TV show interviewing entrepreneurs. And those interviews actually were the beginning of the life that I have today, which I think probably is to some degree connects to you starting that and you seeing, I'm going to go through your bio really quick, but it helped bring your life is today. And so I'm wondering, these interviews, what will they bring for the next phase of my life? Because you meet so many interesting people, you get so many interesting ideas, and it just gets the mind going.
It's the network.
And then the other thing that you said, which I totally agree with, before when I was trying, now I'm on, this is going to be episode 33, I think. We're releasing 2 a week because my goal is to interview as many people as possible. Before I started, it was just like, you know how it is, that hill. I was like, I don't even understand how I'm going to film it and record it and do all the structure. And we got through it, but I can tell you there's so much more work on the back end, which is why you're in business, than I realized that there would be. And luckily I have a team at Lawline that is my LawPods who does all the editing. We have a Trello board, but there's a lot of energy and effort besides just the interview. And again, that's what your business is. So I want to appreciate that hump. But what I'm going to do is I've done some research on you. I've watched a bunch of your podcasts where you were interviewed. I'm going to go through the highlight of your career. Let me know if I have it right. Okay. And then we're going to get into the meat of it. You started as a criminal defense attorney in domestic violence. It was really tough. You were dealing with a lot of cases that you took home with you, and it was sexual assault and other areas like that. When you were 35 years old, you hit a breaking point as a lawyer. You had a new family and you were not happy in your practice. Then so happens you saw a podcast from Tom Bilyeu, I forget how to pronounce the last name. Yeah, who's an awesome, I've seen many of his podcasts, and it was on mindset and identity. And after that podcast, you thought to yourself, you know what? I can do anything I want in my life. As a hobby, you started your own podcast and you bought $1,000 worth of equipment. And then you started thinking about, can I help other people start their own podcast after you went through that process? And you saw a hole for lawyers and law firms to do that. And you decided to focus on this niche of legal and law firms besides just doing it for everybody. And the way we connected is Michael Michalowicz, who is a really great entrepreneur. He wrote a book called Profit First, and he runs an organization to help people grow their business. He connected us because you have built a great business. He connected us to see if there's any ways that potentially Lawline and LawPods, or just me and you talking, I can help generate ideas. And so maybe we'll talk about that today too. So how did I do? Did I miss anything big in there?
No, you made me sound, I think, more brilliant than I am, which was great. The way I got into it was much harder and much messier because I didn't know where it was going to go. It was a hobby. I was playing around with it, and it's one of those things where anybody who's been obsessed about something knows what it's like. You're going to do it whether there's money in it or not. You're going to pour money into it. And so I'm just doing it and I'm playing with it. I can't stop. And I'm at co-working spaces teaching people there how to use it for free. I'm not even charging the places that have the podcast studios. I just want to do it. And all of that, just being in the community and being seen doing it, led to a lawyer at a party saying, hey, I see you doing all this. You think you could help me do it? And that was my first client. And it was a little over 2 years after that I'd been able to quit my full-time job and just jump into this. Still pretty painful.
For clarity, were you running your own law firm or were you working for somebody else?
I did. I had my own law firm, had a handful of employees.
Got it. So you were still doing criminal defense. What year is this?
I was really mostly out of criminal defense by then. This is 2015. It was the threat of having a family that sent me down the rabbit hole because we'd
Yeah.
just gotten married and my wife was like a couple months in. She was like, all right, we should have a baby right this second, because she was right. We were not as young as I think we thought we were. And it was that idea, oh, damn, somebody might live here next year. I'm going to have to be somebody's primary caregiver. And that freaked me out because I was so unhappy and so stressed out and really hanging on by a thread, unbeknownst really to the people around me. And also, I hadn't figured out how to make money at my law firm. Like, I had figured out how to bring some in. I had not figured out how to keep much of it. And babies are expensive. And so that really stressed me out. And that's when I turned to a book, which took me to a podcast, and down the rabbit hole I went.
There's a big delta between starting a podcast to having a significant business that you have today. Did you, besides the initial book and initial podcast from Tom, what other resources have you been using to learn along the way? And if the honest truth is nothing, you've just been doing and figuring it out, that's okay too. I'm just curious if there's anything more, any other books along the way of this growth path you've done. And obviously there is, because Michael.
Hundreds. Yeah, hundreds. That first year, Tom Bilyeu had a
You got any
show called
around
Inside.
you?
Always.
Show me.
This is one, I think I'm on my third go through with this one. I'm reading it with the team, Extreme Ownership.
Yep, I know that book.
Yeah, that's such a powerful book. I read that one early and it was powerful. I read it again a few years later, powerful in a different way. Things that I wasn't ready to understand yet were there. We've always got something. We're talking about Mike. That's a good book, like Systems and Processes. I think copywriting, self-help guy for copywriting. We do a lot of writing around here and I like it to be good. And then tons on the shelf back there.
Just everybody, we did not plan that. It was great to know that you had just books lying around in your desk.
Those are just those are the ones within reach. And then Hormozi's $100 Million Offers book was critical. And that was a little later in my career.
So I read that
I'd
book.
gotten a handful of clients.
So let's talk about that, because I read that book. It's a big book. It's like a workbook size thing, $100 million.
Right.
And it's what I need. And maybe because I don't do client-based business, and it was hard for me to get the takeaways. And can you explain a little bit about that book, what the $100 million offers is, if you're able to share and teach that?
I mean, I'll articulate it the best way I can.
Yeah.
What it really helped me do is create my offer and describe my offer in a way that was far more appealing, that helped people understand the offer. The first thing it did for me was it helped me see your offer is way too complex. You're talking to some really smart people because you're working for lawyers, but I understood that my offer was way too big. It was multiple pages. And bring it down. Small, medium, large. Here is what you're getting. Here's what you get in each package. And I saw an instant change. And it wasn't massive, but an instant change in conversions from just going from that, here's this, and then, here's some add-ons. There are no more add-ons in the business. The add-ons are in the packages. If you want this or this, it's simple, it's clear, people can get their head around it. And so that was one of the biggest takeaways from the book for me. And then just descriptions. It helps you think about ways to describe your offer that are a little more succinct.
Do you share is there a public link to what your offer is now?
There's not a public link, and there will be, but the reason there isn't because I'm still in a place where I'm tweaking it.
Okay.
It's basically the same, but it's still under revision. It's really close. It's converting at the best level it's ever converted. And then the value that's inside the offer is working as well as it's ever worked for the clients. But it is still being tweaked.
Got it. As a side note, it's 16 minutes. You might I know you just run the orthodontist, drink some water a little bit. Like, I can tell your mouth is dry as you're talking. Feel free to drink as much as you want.
And I think it's a lot of more just, I don't usually sound this deep and Barry Whitish.
You sound cool though. Cool. All right. Just going back. Okay. Start edit now. Why, just out of curiosity, why was it called $100 million offers? Or you're not sure? I was curious.
I think
what is,
yeah, the subtitle of the book was offer's so good, people feel stupid saying no, I think. And it's just about making how to write an offer and present an offer that is high ticket, that you
Got
feel
it.
that somebody's more likely to say yes to. And there's a lot of mindset around it too. And then one that I read after that one that really deep dives into very similar concepts is Pricing Creativity by Blair Enns. And he sells it as a big binder and it's back there somewhere. And he sells it for, I think, around $300. And it's worth every penny because it's teaching, the whole point is it's teaching creatives how to price their offers. Instead of thinking, what is everyone else pricing at? Start thinking about what's the value that you're delivering. And they have a podcast. It's called Two Bobs. It's Blair Enns and David C. Baker. I've done a little work with David C. Baker, and he was great. And they talk a lot just about it's marketing agencies. They really focus on marketing agencies and learning how to craft my offer and then feel good about it. Because when you're growing as a business, I think that's one of the harder things. I see it in other people too, is feeling like, oh, I can't charge this. This doesn't feel right. And then you got to break through those walls because when you start thinking about it from a value perspective, what value am I delivering? And then you get into the marketplace and you start to work with all of these other agencies that are serving the same client, and you see the level of work that gets by sometimes out there. And you go, oh, we're going to win because this is not our level of work. Like, we're doing it on a different level. And so that was a lot of fuel for me.
And just because I mentioned Mike Michalowicz and Profit First, how did you connect? You read that book, obviously.
Yeah.
What were you doing with them, and how does that relate to the growth journey that we were talking about before?
Yeah, I discovered Mike, I think around 2019, read Profit First, did not implement it. Loved the ideas, didn't.
What is Profit First?
Every dollar that comes in, split it out, send it on its way. 20% to your profit account, that's yours. Business never gets to see it. 10%, whatever, to your tax account. That's the tax account's. Business never gets to see it. Wherever you need it. And it could be as simple in the beginning as then the rest of the 70% goes off to your operations account. And that's what you can use. You can break it down even further, and I do. But the massive difference, I even set it up. I use a bank that I think Mike's affiliated with called Relay, where you can set up to 20 different accounts. And so I have an income account, and every dollar that comes into the business lands in the income account. And at the end of every single day, it splits out on its own automatically. And then every so often, that profit account, that's my money. As the owner of the business, that profit account is mine.
Got it.
The
So
business
you read the book, you didn't implement
Yeah.
it.
It took
Then
me a
what?
few years to implement.
And
But
and then you started, you reached out to him. What were you working with him on?
yeah, he was pitching some coaching programs, and I'd gotten so much value from him, from reading Clockwork, reading Profit First, All In. I've got all of his books back there. Yeah, I know I read All In, and I said, he's given me such value. I'd listened to a bunch of his podcasts. I'd watched a bunch of his interviews, stuff on YouTube, and I trusted him. I knew that he knew what he was talking about. And so I reached out. I want to be a part of this thing. And so I was involved for about 6 months in a coaching program with him and his team. And I learned a lot. I made some changes. Some of it was to my offer, and some of it was just to my mechanisms for following up with leads. Because as entrepreneurs, we all have things that we're really good at and things that we really hate doing. And so little mechanisms, and they made a big difference. I ended up closing some leads that I was positive were dead. And then I think probably the thing that's going to end up paying off the most is they pushed me to hire a personal assistant and help me understand exactly what that person could help me with, the hiring process for somebody that was going to be that important to the business. Because I had a lot of worries, like this person's going to eventually have access to finances, and helping me understand how important it was and then executing on that.
So you did hire the personal assistant.
I did.
How long have they been working for you now?
About 3 weeks. And it's
3 weeks.
Yeah, about 3 weeks now. And it's been very onboarding a personal assistant when you've been doing everything for 7 years is a massive lift. Thankfully, I found somebody who loves the puzzle, but it's a massive lift to bring them up to speed and even figure out what it is that you want to offboard to them but I think the juice is going to be worth the squeeze.
And I like that. And this is somebody who's not a virtual assistant through a company. This is somebody who is actually working through directly for LawPods, or is it?
Yeah. Yeah. She's a contractor. I found her, I went to Podfest, and when I go to conferences, I just spend most of my time talking to people. I talked to another producer. She had a personal assistant. I said, that's something I'm really trying to work on. And she said, I know somebody who trains them. And if
Yeah.
you fill out her form, she will send your information to anyone she's ever trained for free.
Wow.
She'll
Wow.
send it out. And so I think I got a few applications from her sending that out. I did some interviews and one just stood out.
And amazing. Yeah. And I think we all could benefit, especially, it's funny, as much as we have the team that helps do certain things, there's so many different things that are not being done just from my business and my life and all the things to go through the process. So I wish you luck on that. And I know you're going to learn a lot through that process. But let me pause for a second before we continue. And I want to just give you a moment to say, you've done a ton of interviews, podcasts, I more than I could see than most. Obviously that's your business and you're really good at it. Is there something that you wish you were asked in one of these interviews that you never were asked, or something you'd want to talk about that you hadn't, as it relates to learning or growth or anything else in that regard? If not, that's okay. I always like giving people the opportunity to do that versus just go through the script that they always talk about.
Yeah, I love talking about that kind of stuff. I've probably talked about it. There's so many different angles, but one of the most important things in my journey has been becoming, because when I started, I thought I have this really big check on the wall that I keep on my board in front of me. And I don't even care about the check anymore. It started thinking I want to get to this money. But now the money's cool. I like having money. I have never had any. But the becoming along the way, you could take everything I have away from me and I'm going to get it back, because I became the person. And you were asking me about resources earlier. I was relentless. I read Tom's reading list, every book he put on it. I read everything I could get my hands on. I was mostly listening to every podcast, watching every YouTube video, following Pat Flynn and the podcast Answer Man, Cliff Ravenscraft. Relentless self-improvement.
Say it again, Bob Flynn.
Pat Flynn.
Pat Flynn.
Yeah, Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas. It was the big guy at the time teaching podcasting was Cliff Ravenscraft. I ended up taking his class. It was 2000. I did not have at the time, but it ended up being a really good investment. So the becoming, because people say that's not who I am. I hear that so much. That's just not who I am. And maybe that's true, but that wasn't who I was either. But I knew who I wanted to be, and I shaped that person by relentlessly pursuing it. And that has been the incredible part, is I am not the same person.
Let me ask you, that's amazing and really interesting. I want to dive into that. Out of curiosity, you don't have to share, how big is the check that you wrote on the wall that was to inspire?
$1 million.
$1 million. And was it, so I once did something similar to that, because Jim Carrey.
Right. I was inspired by that.
Yeah. So I'll just share it. The legendary story. A couple of years before, when he had no money, he was just trying to struggle an actor. He wrote a check to himself, $10 million, services rented, and he dated it like 3 or 4 years from then. And then the week before that date was up, he got a $10 million check to be on Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. I have that check in my drawer as well. I have yet to check it. I have yet to cash it. But
mine, I have yet to cash mine. But it's interesting to me. I think I wrote 2020 on it, and I still couldn't cash it. But I'm a hell of a lot closer. Now, if I was to sell my business right now, I could cash it, but the hell if I'm going to do that. I built the foundation. But that's
mine was dated 2014.
Nice. I love it. I love it.
And then with my son, he saw that, and I wrote him a check for $1 million for April 1st, 2028. So hopefully he can cash that himself.
Well, I love that you're holding on to it, because I keep mine there. As I've had people ask me, the date came and went, don't you want to add a new date? No, I do not. That's a reminder that it's always harder than you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make it there, but I'm not just going to make it there. I'm going to far surpass that. And it's not necessarily about the money. I'm not greedy. The money is a reflection of the value I've been able to add in the marketplace. And that is what excites me, is being able to go in there in a competitive place and deliver a product that is worth buying.
It's interesting just to even hear you say, I'm not greedy, because there's a program in your head. It sounds like making
I grew
money
up, yeah.
is greed. And that I only recognize that from years of coaching with being coached from the programs that are in my head around money, which somewhat similar for not so many words. Subconsciously, unconsciously, I was taught being spoiled was the worst thing in the world to some degree. And so it's a similar type of thing. So take me through that for a second, and then we're going to circle back to becoming, but I want to help unprogram you of that if I could, because
no, I love it. I've been working on that for a long time. Scarcity mindset was a major problem and still slightly is, but I've made a lot of progress on it. And I grew up with very little. I think they called them rejects, the shoes that you wore that weren't brand names. They were called rejects, and that's what we wore. But my parents busted their ass. They worked hard and they made it. Like they really did. They pulled themselves up and they made it. And I'm so proud of them. And they helped me along the way after that. But we lived in a trailer. We didn't have much. And it does change the way you look at the world. You get a feeling that there's never enough. And even as stable as they are, my father, when we come home for Christmas, there will be towels shoved under the doors on the second floor because he doesn't want to waste that heat. That's how his scarcity mindset still grabs him. He'd put plastic up over the second floor one time, the hall up, and my mom said, too far. I just can't let you do that. It looks ridiculous. So that was a little bit of what had formed me. And I am coming over that hump, but I will say also, being an entrepreneur in this space, you've met them. There are people who it is about the money. Like that really is it. And I had a mentor one time that tried to convince me to turn my entire business into a white label and just market it, to buy it cheap from another agency and then just sell it. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. But that, to me, that's the most uninteresting thing in the world to me. Hey, I figured out how to make money. That's what I figured out. I figured out how to sell somebody else's product. That's not interesting to me. I want to make something. I want to create something that wasn't there before and design it and find new ways and interesting ways to do it and deliver it and make it better. That's the thing that gets me out of bed. That's the thing that drives me, is I want to create.
As a side note, this will be a win for me. The plastic on the wall story, is that the first time you shared that in a podcast?
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's go back to becoming. I've actually done a lot of self-help stuff before. I've never heard it said in the way that you just said it. Are you taking that from a book that you've read or from a podcast that you heard, or is that like your sort of way you've interpreted different things?
I don't know.
Have you been saying that for a while, or did it just come to you in that moment?
I have.
Okay.
I have probably several years. I have, when I first think I had the epiphany of, wow, I am new. I am different. It worked. And I had that thought, what if I lost it all? Because you have some down moments in the business. You face some hardship and you wonder, is this it? And I had those feelings. Even when everything's okay, you feel that way sometimes. And I had that feeling and I was sitting with it and I thought, and I know I've heard this in a million places, what's the worst thing that could happen? And so I thought about it. What's the worst thing that can happen? This whole business goes belly up. Okay, what do you do next? And I had a plan. Immediately, I had a plan. And I went, holy shit, I know what I'm doing. And that was a moment where I understood you made yourself into someone who can solve these problems. Because in the beginning, you have no idea what you're doing. You assume everyone else does, so you feel very inferior. And you're in this place with no training against people who have marketing degrees and MBAs, and you just feel over your head and ridiculous. But you stay there and you do the work and you put it in, and then you look around and you go, wow, like somewhere in the middle of all that, I became an authority. Yeah. And that was interesting.
No, it's amazing. First of all, that formula. So I don't know if you got it from this book or it's from somewhere else, but the book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, written by Dale Carnegie in, I don't know, the 30s or whatever it was. Yet. So I'm sure you've heard How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, I've read that many times.
This is 100-year-old plus book or something like, I don't remember exactly when it was written, but the first formula that they say is guaranteed to reduce 50% of your worries overnight. And that was that formula. It's number one, what is the worst case scenario? Number two, accept the worst case scenario. Number three, start doing things to improve on the worst case scenario from ever happening.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you do that. I just did a podcast yesterday and he was talking about Stoicism. And it was
Now you're speaking my language.
So I was wondering if you're like, it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about is related to Stoicism. And I was curious, what, if anything, have you read there?
Yeah, right now I'm reading Marcus Aurelius right now, Meditations. And this is my first time. I have it back
there. It's pretty hard to read if in a raw form, because it's just his journals. So I was curious, Ryan Holiday's interpretation of it makes it much easier. But I was curious.
Yeah, I don't have Ryan's. I have a slightly different interpretation, but it does make it easier. And it gives you I don't remember what you call it, but basically the intro is long, just giving you the foundational knowledge you need to even understand what you're about to read, which was interesting for me because it has to set the stage for you. You have to understand what the words he's saying mean, or they'll be meaningless to you. And so it's been very interesting to start reading that. And then I'm reading The Daily Dad. It's Ryan Holiday's parenting daily reader, essentially. And that has been, I've sent it to multiple friends of mine that are fathers. And it's such a lovely book. Just each day has one little passage. Generally, a lot of Stoic philosophy is rooted in there. And I love it. I've been following Holiday. Again, we're back to Tom Bilyeu. He introduced me to Ryan Holiday. I think he was on maybe Inside Quest, which was Tom's show when he was still at Quest. And I was immediately attracted to it. I love for lack of a better word, the philosophy. Yeah. And so I've been following Holiday. I've read many of his books. Ego is the Enemy. The Obstacle is the Way was that's a foundational book for me. I think everyone should read it. Yeah.
I wrote a book in 2019 called The Fast Forward Mindset. It's about essentially how to get through your comfort zone and keep moving forward. And when I read The Obstacles Away, I was like, oh my God, it's literally the same thing in a different format of the Fast Forward Mindset. And I was like, damn, what could I have done differently to get it out there? But it was actually a lot at each part of the book. I told this story about the struggles of growing Lawline in the first 10 years. It was geared towards entrepreneurs. Yeah. But yeah, there so much that I've learned that I didn't realize that when I learned it came from Stoic philosophy. Much of that kind of stuff does.
Yeah, and I could feel it in there. I don't say this for flattery. For anybody who hasn't read the book, I recommend it. I enjoyed it. The stories, especially just listening to the stories about your dad, they really resonated. I like the book a lot.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. And I'm working on my second book now, which is even harder than the first one. I just want to make sure I understand this becoming philosophy. So right now, is it a constant? Like right now, is this about enjoy the journey, not the destination type thing? So you're always becoming. So I'm trying to get what's the takeaway? Because I see this when I put this in my AI and say, what's the title of this podcast and what we're doing? And I see it's something like becoming X, Y, and Z. And I just want to make sure how the person listening who's a lawyer, either moving in legal tech or even practicing law, how do they apply that?
I'll tell you, it's a blessing and a curse, because I don't know who I'm going to be in 10 years, but I will be surprised if I am not still pursuing. I don't think I will arrive. I don't think there is a destination for someone like me. Have some water.
Yeah.
I am so curious about everything to a fault. I can't stop. I need to understand everything. I see it and I'm like, oh, I should know about that. And I have certain things that really draw my attention more than others. But I just have this insatiable appetite for understanding and for improving on the things that I enjoy doing. I'm not out there learning how to throw a curveball. I wish I could have. Wanted to be a Major League Baseball player as a kid. Had very little talent. But I'm spending a lot of time and energy pursuing the things that I really want to be good at. And some of those are business related, but.
So if I'm an attorney listening right now and I have something resonated with the word becoming, how do I apply that to my life?
I always think who do I want to be? I started there. If somebody was giving my eulogy, what do I want them to say? What do I want people to feel about me if I'm not here? And that kind of tells you who you want to be, who you would like to become. And then I start taking actions in accordance with that.
Have you ever written your eulogy?
Not directly, no. I recently had a conversation with my 7-year-old daughter. We talk about a lot of really deep stuff. She's very fun to talk to about stuff. But I asked her one night, just because I felt compelled, I asked her if I could talk to her about something that might make her sad. And she said, yeah. And I essentially told her the Mufasa story. I might not be here tomorrow. Here's the things I need you to understand. I'm proud of you. I'm not going to go too deep because this isn't the place for it, but I don't want to go all emotional on you. But that felt so freeing, because I hear so many stories of people that had something left unsaid that I wish I'd had another time. And instead I was like, I might not be here in the morning. And here are the things that you should know. And I write some of that stuff too. I make videos on my phone when I feel something. I'll take out my phone, I'll make a video. And I did it. I was in New York a few weeks ago by myself, and I was walking home from a concert, and I just made like a 10-minute video for my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to show it to them. It's not for them now. It's in case or when. And so that's, I guess, the way I feel about like tiny little eulogies, but not directly. I haven't written it, but I've thought a lot about how I want to be seen.
It's so interesting. And I talk about it a lot during this podcast. My mom died unexpectedly this past May, and she walked in the hospital, died 26 days later. Was not ready, it was not the way it was supposed to be. And I'm still dealing with that. But the one thing that sort of resonated with me, there was a moment where towards the last week, she could hear, but she couldn't talk. And she could signal that she could hear by squeezing her hands, or every so often you say, open your eyes, you open it. And we all took turns saying our goodbyes to her and what we wanted to say and everything. And what makes me really sad is she never got to say I know what she would have said, but she never got to say it to us. But there is a positive thing to this story. Exactly 1 year before she died, my son and I decided to make a documentary about her. And the reason we literally published it the year before she died. And the reason we did, I was talking to this guy who I had met, who they moved to Australia, and I asked him why. And he goes, you know what? I never really had that conversation with my mom, and now she's no longer here, and I will never know the answer. And it made me realize that too often in life, it's the fathers who get all the accolades and who are the business people and things like that. And my mom had been through cancer twice before. And there was just something I said, I want to make sure she can tell her story of how she grew up and what her childhood was like and what it was there. And so it's only 25 minutes long, but it's something that like we cherish now. And then since then, to what you said, my son has interviewed my dad and my wife's parents, and he's turning those into videos as well. So I can really resonate with what you said. And to me, to some degree, the fast forward mindset, this book that I'm working now, these someday, hopefully, these will be legacies for my kids. Even these podcasts, there's nuggets all throughout here. So I'm similar to you. I'm constantly sprinkling things everywhere. And just one more thing on that, which about a month or two before she died, I was at this event where they said, get on your phone, send a video to somebody that you love and cherish and thank them for that. And I sent that video to her, and I have it on my phone now. And I'm just so grateful that that happened. All these weird things that happened before.
I love that.
Yeah.
Who was the speaker?
For that event?
Yeah, that asked you to do that.
Yeah, it's funny. I know him, and I'm blanking. I'm gonna find.
Okay.
Actually, no.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I wanted. It's embarrassing because I literally know him very well, and when you're on the spot, but I'm looking right now, and it's worth the effort because his whole thing. Actually, I have his book right here. Hold on.
Does he talk about video?
Bart, if you end up watching this, I do know you. I just was having a senior moment. It's Bart Foster. He wrote this book called Business Outside. his whole thing is, and he actually was at this retreat that I was just at. His whole thing is about getting people outside of the office and going for walks and talking and getting to know each other and getting you outside of everywhere. And so I was on a walk with him in Miami with about 120 other entrepreneurs and YPOers actually. And he had us all go on our phones and send the videos to people.
I love
Really
that.
great guy. Yeah.
I was hoping it was the same guy because I did Tony Robbins' Business Mastery it was in West Palm Beach in 23. And one of the speakers, he speaks a lot about video and adding video to your proposals, which was huge. I started adding video to my proposals and it made a huge difference.
Well,
But he had us take out our phone and do the same thing because he was trying to get us comfortable with just filming ourselves so we could just make quick videos.
yeah.
And I sent one to my mom and look around the room, and there was a couple thousand of us in there, and like half of us are crying because we're doing this like emotional thing that we feel but we haven't communicated. And my mom loved it. It was great, and I have it here too.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Let me ask one more. By the way, I always feel like a good interview is when we both feel at the end we've been through some sort of therapy session, and I feel that way right now. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah. Yes. That's every conversation I have. This is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's interesting when you find it.
It's funny because this is the only kind of conversation I truly love. I struggled with small talk because I just want to get right to the deep of it. And
tell me how you feel about death.
Who are we? Why do we exist?
Right.
And I still want that answer, but let me bring you back to your law career because I am curious about this. If you've thought about this, was there ever a path in a different life, if you went to a different area of law or in other areas where you could have seen yourself being this becoming person within the legal field, practicing law? Or do you think when you look back at it now, it was always inevitable that you would have been more not practicing and more in this entrepreneurial vibe?
I thought about this before. I think it was inevitable because I look back at the things that I was interested in as a kid, and I've always been interested in creativity and marketing. I just didn't understand what those were. Nobody around me, that just wasn't a career path. There were no classes to take. There was no one that you could look at and watch. I didn't know anyone who was in a creative space or who was in a marketing space, but those things always interested me. I was always interested in the ways a phrase was used and how it worked and what made a good commercial and what made a bad commercial. And I've just my whole life been drawn to this creative space. But the thing about law is I love it. I do not regret having gone through it because law, we all know this, it taught us to think like a lawyer. And I think that it sounds a little trite sometimes, but I think that was the most important thing about law school for me, was it changed the way I think. I am no longer allowed to have a conclusion and work backwards. You don't get to have beliefs just because you have them, just because that's the way you've always felt. You have to start over here. You have to analyze. And if it does not stand up to scrutiny here, you do not get to go to conclusion. And that changed my political leanings over a period of 3 or 4 years, like pretty severely.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the beliefs I had did not make it past the analysis stage. They just didn't. They just withered. And so that has been great for me, thinking like a lawyer. But the thing I found in law that killed me was the conflict. I do not like conflict. In any given day, I want harmony. I want peace. I will have conflict when I need it. It's just a part of life. But in law, which I was in litigation because that's the thing I enjoyed, is business development is recruiting conflict. Do you have some conflict I could take for you? Yeah. And that crushed me. And then the type of person who gets drawn into litigation, some are great people, obviously, but there are a lot of certain personalities that enjoy turning the screws. And that's just not who I am.
Yeah.
I am a resolution person. I want to understand how can we all get this done so we can all actually get down to the business of life instead of the business of fighting about life. And so that was not the right space. And then I tried some other stuff. I tried estate planning at the end, and I was so bored.
Yeah.
So I have such a draw to the areas that I am in right now that I think it would always end up in some kind of creative space telling stories.
What keeps you up at night right now?
Processes. That's where we are in the business, is creating processes that can be duplicated, that we can now scale our team and deliver the same incredible product without having any diminishment anywhere in the chain. And that's incredibly hard.
What does it look like without selling your business in 12 months from now? Let's say 24 months from now, you take that check off your wall and you cash it. What needs to happen? And you're not greedy for doing that. You're a successful entrepreneur. What needs to happen for you to cash that check?
If we 3x in the next 18 months, which, I mean, last year we didn't 2x, but we did well. And this year we are on track to more than double from last year. We had a really strong first 2 months of the year. And if we keep going on that track, I think I can cash that check in 18 months. Not that I want to.
I know it's evil.
Yeah.
It's evil.
No, I don't think it's evil. That's not why. It's not why. It's because the money's that's not important.
No, totally. I don't disagree with you, and I'm with you on that. And I think it's even, and I understand everything you're saying there. So I'm not going to push that envelope. But there is an interesting thing of checking that box off the list, even if you then redeposit it back in your business, just to actually, because I
hear that.
It's just like a nice check box of an accomplishment.
I hear that. At some point. You think I should make them pull the money out and hold it and then send it back? Because I could see that, be like, all right,
maybe.
Take some pictures on it. I love it.
I don't know. I could talk to you for hours, and maybe hopefully we'll talk again soon. I've
enjoyed this immensely.
I've asked you some pretty probing questions, and I always like to give my guests, if they have one, that's something popped up, on any topic, any probing questions for me that sort of came to your mind that you would love to know. And if not, that's okay too. We could just leave it at a great interview. But I feel like uneasy when I've been asking all these questions the whole time, and I want to be vulnerable or helpful if I can as well.
Tell me about a moment when you really thought it was all going to shit and how you felt and what you did.
There's certainly been different times of that. Yeah. One thing that pops up into mind, and I talk about it in the Fast Forward Mindset, it was my third COO that in 6 years that I was about to fire. And every COO just was imploding the relationships. And the way I built my business, I built it on the scaling up model, where essentially I was the visionary and the COO was the integrator. So I was not necessarily involved in the day-to-day. And so actually, I'm sorry, it was when the second COO left, Jeff Reekers, who we're close friends to this day, he was really running the business. And when he left, I remember he wrote me and it was contentious when he left, but again, we got through that easily soon after. He wrote me sort of a plan of how to, when the company falls apart, here's all the things to cut. I was like, damn, wow, okay. And I was just so nervous about getting back into the day-to-day and figuring out how to run and grow the company. And I rolled up my sleeves and I figured things out and we got through it. But I remember I was having conversations with my dad about how stressed I was and trying to figure it out. And my dad said something that was so interesting to me. I'm here stressed in this world of stress, and I'm doing that. And he's sitting there right next to me. And he's zero, he's like, isn't it interesting that you're sitting there, your life is falling apart. I'm sitting here next to you and everything's fine. And it was just a weird thing where you didn't have, and he's invested in the success of the business too. And it was just like for me to recognize I didn't have to live in that world. I could live in a world where everything is fine and figure out how to get through it without having to deal with being in that stress. And so for me, what I realized and what's been helpful for the rest of my career is things go in waves, and there's always waves. And when things are at the lowest, hold on, keep working through it because they will start to get to the top. And when they're at the top, recognize that they'll keep going. It's never like that. And so that's always been a helpful process for me.
Man, that is so true. The waves.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it makes sense because as you push to do new things, there's a learning curve. And as you're trying to always grow your company, you're going to make mistakes and figure things out. And leadership is such a challenging thing. I'm so glad we did this, Robert. I feel much more connected to you, and I want to meet you in person sooner than later. Remind me where you live?
Raleigh. I refuse to say North Carolina, but I'll say it.
Well, so how, just out of curiosity, okay, let's end the podcast. We'll talk for a minute offline. Thank you so much for joining, and we will see you soon.
All right.